You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Now, today we're going to tackle a problem that I believe a lot of D2C founders know too well, and it's product sourcing. I believe the current system as it is right now is a little bit broken. I think most brands really are stuck, unfortunately, kind of scrolling endlessly through Alibaba listings, maybe talking to a middleman who may or may not represent the actual factory. I think that's really the key thing that I've learned along the way here, and maybe spending weeks kind of verifying these suppliers, maybe to turn out that they're very unreliable. I think there's a language barrier. I think there's a time zone barrier. I think when you talk about these tariffs, and I don't want to get into politics here, but I think there's a lot of instability, like geopolitical things going on right now. You kind of add that to the mix, and depending maybe even on a single country like China only, I think a lot of times now is becoming a little bit riskier for a lot of brands. And that's the reason why I have my guest on today, who's Ricky Ho. He's the founder of a company called SourceReady. And, Ricky, I did some research on him kind of before recording, and he's actually a third generation kind of manufacturing family. And he built his kind of like first kind of supply chain, it's very interesting. In the early 20s, he raised some venture capital through Sequoia and GGV, and eventually he kind of earned his spot in the Forbes 30 under 30 in Asia. And it's so interesting, some of his whole trajectory. And the nice thing about SourceReady that I think it's kind of rethinking about how brands kind of find and vet manufacturers. I think that's really important. Like, instead of kind of like this, I'm going to call it email ping pong, but it's kind of what the reality is, like finding these factory reps or, guessing which supplier to trust based on these, crowd platforms. It gets pretty scary out there. And I think that's the difference. I think he's built a tool now, and AI is really now consolidated and really helped, these businesses now. And he's actually working all around the world now. It's not just in China. Think about Vietnam, think about India and Mexico and things like that. So it's really interesting. So Ricky, a long preamble here. I'm really to unpack a lot of this, but welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Steve, and great to be on the show.
Yeah. So, you grew up inside this manufacturing family, and you built and sold a supply chain tech company kind of, in your early 20s. And now here we are building SourceReady. Can you talk a little about maybe some of these, the core patterns that you keep seeing that convinced you that maybe the sourcing process kind of needs to be rebuilt more than just a marketplace?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I actually grew up in a manufacturing family, so I understand how factories think. And so one of the things that really kind of highlighted to me was, if you think about, like, let's say you want to source apparel. For the average kind of founder that's not like a sourcing professional, it's actually very hard to tell which factories are actually super high quality or premium and which ones are not. If you just go to an Alibaba listing, they all look pretty much the same. And until you actually order a sample or actually do a bulk production, you actually don't know which ones are the good quality ones and which one are not. And I think one of the problems with Alibaba and these directories is their business model fundamentally. So they make 90%, Alibaba makes 90% of their revenue from supplier advertising. So what that means is they actually don't make money from the buyers. They make money from the factories paying for the listing. So when you search like a keyword on Alibaba, say, hey, you want to find, let's say, a hoodie supplier, the suppliers that show up on the first page are basically the suppliers that pay the most money to Alibaba to rank on the first page. And that is the reason why a lot of times, you would assume like the supplier that shows up on the first one would be like the most reliable, the highest quality, the one that Alibaba vetted. But that is not the case, because they make all their revenue from basically factories pay for advertising. And if you talk to like sourcing and procurement teams at established companies like Ralph Lauren or Lululemon or Calvin Klein, they would almost never rely on Alibaba to find suppliers because all of their vendors, like the ones that are actually working with Lululemon, they're not on Alibaba. So if you look at, for example, my family business, we're one of the largest suppliers for PVH, which is the company behind Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. You will not find our information on any directory, on any Alibaba site. And that is the case for any major, retailer or brand. Like most of their core vendors are not on these directories. And that's what makes it hard for a lot of these, smaller startups. Let's say, your sales are growing and you want to improve your product quality and you want to find these better manufacturers. If you don't know someone that knows these factories, it's actually very hard to even find, which suppliers are actually going to be these more premium quality suppliers. So this is the problem with supplier discovery today. It's like it's dominated by ad-driven directories. And it's very hard to find objective data where you can easily find actually the quality manufacturers around the world.
And I think the other thing we think about too is kind of pricing, because I think a lot of brands, unfortunately, are kind of optimizing for the price per unit.
Yep.
And I think your platform is quite a bit different, where you kind of like aggregate a lot of different data sources,
Yep.
like customer records and certifications and trade show roster and these sort of things. So, like, can you talk a bit about that? Because I think that's kind of these overlooked signals that a lot of people aren't thinking about. Now I understand the advertising component that I didn't realize that to me is broken at Alibaba, and it doesn't feel that if 90% of the revenue is coming from that's broken to me, and I think that's unfortunate. But then on the flip side, you're building something different where you're understanding larger signals that equal quality.
Yeah, so I think the best proxy for quality is understanding what are the types of customers the supplier currently works with. And part of that is leveraging import-export data and customs data. So we actually spend a lot of time going to each country. Like we have customs data from Vietnam, from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from China, from US, from Mexico. And, it's actually interesting. You can actually, through a lengthy process, get data directly from the customs agencies in these governments. And with this data, you can essentially find out where any exporter or supplier, who are they exporting to? And this gives you a really good proxy for, let's say you want to find really premium quality yoga pants in Vietnam. Well, what does premium actually mean? Premium is actually a very subjective metric, right? Like if you ask a supplier over Alibaba, hey, do you make premium quality? Like every supplier will respond, yes, we make the best quality. But in reality, there's actually a spectrum of quality, right? Like the supplier that primarily supports Walmart and Target is very different than the supplier that works with Alo Yoga or Lululemon. And I think the misconception a lot of people have is that, like all these suppliers are similar. There's no really difference in their capability. But, coming from a manufacturing family, I can tell you like the factory design and manufacturing process is very different. Like a Walmart factory is very different than a Lululemon factory. Like even though both are just making yoga pants, it's completely different. And I think the reason why using these signals like import-export data is useful is like when I click into a vendor, AI can actually look at all the customers that this supplier mainly works with and say, hey, 70 to 80% of the customers that this supplier currently supports are on the premium side of the product spectrum. And that is the best proxy to determine whether this supplier actually, manufactures relative premium products. And this is like, if you think about just from an anecdotal perspective, if you were to go to some trade show and, you talk to a factory, the most common question that people ask is, hey, what other brands or customers are you currently working with?
Right.
And you could imagine in your own head, if a supplier says, oh, we're mainly work with Walmart. And in your mind, if you're trying to make like super premium quality, you probably will also think like, oh, if Walmart is not exactly known for the best quality of product, maybe it's the cheapest, or maybe they have, good volume, but they're definitely not the most premium. So I think that is the metric that we think has the best proxy for determining what I call supplier persona, right? And quality might not be the thing that every brand is driving towards. Some brands care a lot about cost, right? They want to be cost competitive. Then in that case, working with a Target or Walmart could actually be a good signal because, these retailers are very, very cost sensitive. And, these factories are optimizing every single cost that they can cut. So So yeah, I think there's a lot of signals that we can get out of depending on the types of customers the suppliers are already working with.
It's interesting too when you talk about like that, like the financial side of it too. When you think about just the tariff things that are going on right
Yep.
now, and a lot of brands think about diversification a little bit,
Yep.
and they're talking about. I mean, even Apple's doing it, but like the whole nearshoring thing. You can think about like Mexico. You mentioned
Yep.
Vietnam, India, and
Yep.
stuff like that. Can you talk a bit about this whole diversification mindset? Because I think sometimes some brands are doing $100,000 a month. Maybe their diversification is different than a brand that's doing $2 million a month. And like, because I
Yep.
think there's more levers to pull. But I'm curious from your perspective, like what are brands thinking about based on their kind of like their GMV or their complexity stage?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, diversification is something that every brand should think about, but it's also very
Hmm.
challenging because
Yeah.
the more regions you source out of, the more complex your logistics processes, your
Yeah.
compliance processes. So I would say when you're small, the best way to do diversification is actually work with vendors with multiple COs or country of origins. What I mean by that is
Right.
a lot of Chinese vendors, they actually have factories in multiple countries, right? So like, they'll have a factory in Ningbo, China, but they'll also have a factory in Vietnam. And they'll also have a factory, even some of them are setting up shop in Mexico. So the benefit of that is like if you're a small company and you don't have the capacity or capability to manage all these countries, you can rely on the supplier to do it for you. So, you tell the Chinese vendor like, hey, I want part of the product to be in Vietnam and part of the product to be in China. The supplier can do the complexity of handling the customs and the compliance differences. And, they have the expertise of knowing which products makes more sense to make in China, which products makes more sense to make in Vietnam. So I would say that's the case for the smaller scale brand because you're not going to have the ability to work with 6 different vendors yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
for ones that are like growing and kind of scaling their volume, I would say diversification looks a little different. You probably don't want to send all your orders to one single vendor. You want to actually diversify the vendor source because if something goes wrong with a particular vendor, you don't want your entire supply chain to be halted. And with that, I would say the key risk with diversification is actually raw materials for the most case. So
Mm.
if you think about most consumer products, the assembly process is actually something that's relatively low barrier to entry. And for the most case, for most consumer products like apparel or hats or accessories, you can pretty much make this in any developing country, whether it's India, China, or Vietnam. The reason why China has been the country that everyone goes to is because they have a vertically integrated supply chain. So, China not only can assemble the clothing, they also all the raw material is there too. All the fabrics are there. Even the cotton is from there, and as a result, is very efficient, right? That's why you can get products within from design to your doorstep in 45 days. Um,
I see.
now, when you go to a country like Vietnam or India or even like say Mexico, Mexico does not have a vertically integrated supply chain for most categories. And as a result, like even if you find an apparel manufacturer in Mexico, you're most likely still reliant on the Chinese raw material supplier to ship it to Mexico first, and that significantly reduces agility and increases lead times. And the challenge with that is you have to plan ahead of time, and it makes your supply chain planning more complex. So let's say you're a large scale brand and you say, hey, I want to do diversification and I want to move some of my production to, let's say Mexico or even somewhere in South America. Now now what you'll have to do is you have to plan basically 3 to 4 months ahead because you need the raw materials to also ship to South America or wherever. And most likely your product portfolio would need to be more concentrated ahead of time because in China, you can make almost any product right away because they just have so many different raw material suppliers that they can immediately, buy from and the raw material will arrive in 3 days or 2 days. But if
Mm.
let's say you're sourcing from Argentina, you can't say, okay, today I want to make a cotton t-shirt and then tomorrow I want to make a polyester jacket. Now, because
Yeah.
for that Argentinian supplier, they have to also order the polyester material and the cotton, and it might take 2 weeks for the raw material to arrive. And that's why, the planning stage for diversification, like if you're moving away from China, you need to have a very good, roadmap on what products should go where should I think about raw material sourcing, and how should I think about lead time. And that's why, a lot of brands are adopting what I call China plus one, which is like, they still source out of China for a lot of things where they need agility, But for things that are already stable, like you kind of have a very high predictability. Like let's say your best sellers, right? Like you know you're going to order the same product every season and the raw material is not really changing. Then you can start moving some of that product to these cheaper countries or nearshore countries where you can basically just front load the raw material ahead of time because you know that you're just going to constantly make them over time. And you have this constant inflow of orders and you don't really need to change all the time. So that's what I would say for kind of these larger scale brands, what how they should think about it.
What's interesting too is I've been learning a lot. I had Izzy on from Portless, and it's interesting what he's doing. It sounds like it really could be a 1-2 punch here, because I think the problem is the sourcing problem is one idea, but then on the flip side, I think there's this I think there's a math of like, well, what if we fulfill the order, find the right supplier, but then fulfill the order domestically from within China to the US. And I think that solves a lot of the time delay problems. And I think it creates an interesting financial nexus around the fact that the source of goods you only pay when you actually fulfill the order instead of having to bring it all over. So what's your thought about potentially the 1-2 punch of like, well, using SourceReady to find the appropriate supplier, and then once samples and MOQs are kind of figured out, then having the product maybe in a portless office or warehouse in China for U.S. fulfillment. Is this something that some people are doing, or do you feel that the better solution is to use your platform and then fully import into the U.S. for U.S. consumption?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the product category, and it depends
Yeah.
on the what your volumes are. So
Okay.
I'll give an example. Like I don't know if you've heard of Shein,
Yeah.
or even Temu. Like
Timo, yeah.
that's what they do. Like Temu, most of their products are just shipping directly from the warehouse in China directly to your doorstep.
Right.
And the reason why they're able to do this is also part of the reason is they're avoiding tariffs, because previously there's a loophole essentially called de minimis, where any product that's under $800 is not essentially tariffed, because they're not shipping it in bulk. There's like individual packages essentially, and shipping was so cheap back then because they found loopholes in the way they can kind of bulk together smaller packages and treat it like one package. I think there's some challenge with this. Number one is if you need better fulfillment on the customer side, like let's say you want to be able to do returns and do better customer service, that is going to be a challenge. And it also depends on the type of product. Like let's say you're doing furniture, like these are very bulk heavy, big items.
Right.
That is probably not realistic to do air shipping via that. It's going to be very, very expensive. So for certain types of products, like if you're drop shipping or if you're making like very small accessory stuff and you don't have huge volume, I think that is a strategy that you can pursue. However, the U.S. Customs is cracking down on this. Like this whole loophole of not paying tariffs is being challenged. But yeah, I would say that is a strategy that you can go after, and it certainly makes the logistics aspect much easier on it, because essentially you don't need to be the importer of record. Like essentially the supplier is doing it for you. Like they're basically acting as the end-to-end DDP. Like they're shipping directly to the doorstep of your customer, right? But yeah, I think the answer is it depends. But I think generally, if you're small and your product category also allows for it, I think this is a strategy that can reduce overhead.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's say a brand like signs up with SourceReady. Maybe they're convinced that maybe they need to fix their sourcing. Can you walk me through kind of like say the first 30 or 60 days? Like what does the implementation actually look like, and like where do I don't know, most brands get maybe stuck, or are most brands surprised by getting access to your platform?
Yeah, I think fundamentally our platform kind of works similar to like a ChatGPT or Gemini, where everything is through natural language. So you can kind of just describe the requirements of what you want to find. But the difference between ChatGPT and Gemini obviously is the data that we've collected. So we have all this supplier data in our system, and I would say for the first day of using SourceReady, the core thing that we want to show is the differentiated data and insights that we're able to generate on the vendors that we have. So if you were, as you mentioned, go to Alibaba, you scroll endlessly through multiple pages, and you basically see very similar suppliers, that's very hard to tell, what are the differences between A and B and C. So what we want to say is like, hey, tell us exactly what type of requirement. So if you tell us you want premium quality and you want to find a supplier with an MOQ lower than 500 and you want a supplier that, has this capability and this certification, our AI is going to, based on your specific criteria, rank the suppliers exactly to your requirements. And then it's going to tell you exactly why this supplier, for example, can make premium quality. So it'll tell you like, okay, this supplier is a major supplier for aloe yoga. Most likely the supplier is going to have a higher standard for quality. So you don't really need to reason yourself. Like the AI essentially is already explaining to you why a supplier is a good fit against your criteria. And then I would say on the second or third day of using SourceReady, the key proposition is automating the outreach and kind of the communication process, because anyone that's ever sourced a product, knows the experience of, staying up at 2 a.m., replying factories in China and going back and forth and answering the same question 10 times to 10 different suppliers. So I would say one of the second key value aspects that we kind of try to emphasize is the ability to automate the supplier outreach and also have AI do a lot of this follow-up for you. So instead of you having to stay up at 2 a.m. messaging each of these suppliers, you can have AI kind of do the outreach for you, and you wake up the next morning and you have 6 quotes ready, and you can immediately have AI analyze, which suppliers have the most competitive quote and makes the most sense. And because of this, it allows you to actually expand your outreach. So most brands that that are small, because they're limited by their time essentially, no one is going to be reaching out to 50 suppliers or 100 suppliers. Like, that's just a crazy amount of time that you have to spend. But AI allows you to kind of scale your outreach. So instead of only messaging 5 suppliers, you can have AI message, 20 or 30 or 40 suppliers.
It's interesting though, I typed in kind of before recording, and I have it on my screen here right now. I typed in, so I created an account. Well, first of all, I logged in right on the homepage, and it lets you kind of query the typical kind of chat window. So I put in like MagSafe phone holder. And I was just curious on what kind of magnetic phone holders are available out there. And then it asked me a couple quick questions, and then, within 10 seconds, it popped back with like 90 suppliers. And there's a couple different filters. The couple filters that are there is just, and asked me for like, some contact information and some kind of basic details and things. So kind of walk me through like what's happening here now that I have these 90 MagSafe phone holder suppliers. They seem to be sorted in some kind of reasonable order. They're verified. And so like I know I'm not showing it visually here, but for people that, if we're trying to walk them through, what could they expect now? Now I'm looking at 90 suppliers, and a lot of them are 100% matched. For a particular supplier, they're OEM manufacturer or they're an ODM manufacturer, and kind of walk us through what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, so there's 2 things. One is, as you mentioned, there's a 100% match. If you were to click on that match, the AI actually explains to you why it's a match against your criteria. And the second thing is, you can click into the profile and see more detailed information about the supplier's description, what products they offer. For example, you'll also be able to see customers that they currently work with.
I see that.
And what you can do next is essentially invite. So you can kind of select the current page, and there's 2 things you can do. Either you can save this into a list first, right? You can create a list called MagSafe suppliers that you're researching, right? And you save all the suppliers that you think are interesting. And then later on, you can basically click invite to quote, and you can bulk invite all the suppliers that fit this criteria. And then you could essentially have AI reach out to all 90 if you wanted to. And then, the next morning you'll wake up and you'll see like 10 different quotes come back. So essentially, this initial search process is just narrowing down the suppliers that best fit this initial criteria. And then the second step would be actually reaching out and automating the quote collection process.
I see. Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, and I love the fact that there's things that you would never really have access to. Like once I kind of start digging into the one particular company here, and I start looking at their customers, then it starts getting into factory images that you have here. So these are either ones that boots on the ground your team has done, or they have supplied on behalf of through the network. Like it's pretty amazing. You actually get to see, wow, this is their environment, how clean it is. You can see some of the workers. It's so interesting that I think a lot of the stuff you wouldn't have access to if it wasn't for your platform, and how you're aggregating it all together in a company record.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, this is amazing. So you sign up, you get that done. So then, like, how do you guys earn money? So what is the revenue model to get access to the platform? And then, could this be like a one and done campaign, trying to find a new product, or expanding or enhancing a current product? Or do you find a lot of your customers just continue on being customers because they just want to continue iterating and finding and expanding?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our business model, unlike Alibaba, we don't make money from ads from suppliers.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the list that you see there is not biased at all. So it's not like we're putting the supplier there because they're paying us to be there. So
Right.
that's a fundamental difference. But it is still free for most small businesses. Like if you're not sourcing, all the time, we give actually 30 free credits
Ah.
every day for free.
Okay.
So what that means is, every day you log in, you get 30 credits, and every time you do a search, it kind of uses some credits.
Right.
But if let's say you do have some volume, right, and you're sourcing more products and you want to reach out to more suppliers, then you would upgrade to our different tiers, and that gives you different amount of credits, and you can buy credits depending on how much you're going to be using it. Yeah, and our pricing is very competitive. So we start at like I think 20 something dollars a month for our entry
Right.
tier. And then for teams with like, serious procurement and you do a lot of sourcing, I think the pro tier is like 299 a month. But generally, like we see customers, they make back this ROI 10x at least, because you could imagine if you're ordering, $20,000 worth of product, if I can help you identify a supplier that's 10% cheaper than what you otherwise would have found, that's $2,000 I just saved you. And
Hmm.
that pays for the software 10 times. So it's like, I would say the ROI is very high if you were to utilize it correctly.
Yeah. This is amazing. And I guess my last kind of question, and I don't want to come across as being negative about, but there's a lot, when you talk about tariffs, we talk about the kind of the geopolitical realities of what's happening right now in 2026. With all this turbulence that's happening, even global trade regulations, there's a lot of
Yep.
stuff going on right now.
Yep.
It's like, so how do you see, because you're like boots on the ground too, like how do you see the supply chain kind of risk management evolving? Because you said that based on your complexity and maturity, you may not want to, go to too many other countries. Maybe you're best to think about Mexico or Vietnam only, or directly from China. I'm just curious on what your mindset is right now and kind of where you see the market evolving this year.
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is the reason why people like working with Chinese suppliers and why China has been so dominant is because Chinese vendors typically are just more experienced in terms of not just manufacturing, but also the whole product development process. So
Right.
if you go to Mexico, I can tell you, like I've spoken with brands going there. If they've been to China and they compare Mexico versus China, like Mexico, most of these suppliers, their English is worse. It's like you send them a product image and they don't even know how to like understand it. You have to be like very detailed to them. Like in China, like you send them some like image and they'll just
Yeah.
get it done. They'll just get it done. Like they know they've done this so many times. They know how to convert an idea
Right.
into a product. So I would say it really depends on the maturity of your own operations. So if you have like a design team and a product development team and a sourcing team that understands the nuances of each region and has the ability to train these suppliers in these, new regions, I think diversification away from China is 100% something that you should immediately do.
Right.
But if you are a small to medium-sized brand just getting started, you're just like some founder and you don't have the time or the even know-how to know how to communicate with these vendors outside of China, I would say generally it's easier to work with either Chinese vendors or Taiwanese vendors or Korean vendors, these more developed manufacturing countries with foreign direct investment factories in these regions, right? So like
Hmm.
let's say you work with a Taiwanese factory in Mexico. You're not actually talking to the guy in Mexico. You're talking to some guy in Taiwan. And he's like he has all the experience in product development and he'll tell you like, okay, this product we'll make in our Mexico factory. And we'll handle, all the logistics and you just send it you in the same process, you send them an image of what product you want and they'll handle the rest. So I think that is kind of like a hack. Like you get the benefit of diversification without the challenges of working with a local vendor that isn't necessarily as experienced in terms of being able to help out someone without the operational capability. So
Hmm.
that's the other part. And then in terms of what you talked about compliance and regulation, Part of the motivation of building this aggregator is we believe to be honest, a lot of suppliers are quite scammy. What I mean by scammy is the information that they put on Alibaba or these profiles don't actually reflect their true operations. So as you mentioned, some suppliers, they say they're a manufacturer, but they're actually not. They're actually just like a trading company disguising as a manufacturer. And because of Alibaba's business model, they don't actually do the verification as in-depthly as they should. And because like these companies pay a lot of money to Alibaba to rank. So they're kind of disincentivized to kind of penalize them. So one of the things that we really focus on is verification using objective data sources. So we get data directly from customs agencies. We get data from government to check their incorporation data. Are they in good legal standing? And also currently we're actually integrating sanctions data too. So you can do sanction screening to make sure this supplier do a background check. Are they being sanctioned by any major government, or are they using any materials that are sanctioned by the U.S. government or by any other Western government? And this is actually some people think like, oh, this is such a small scenario, this will never happen to me. This is actually not the case. In 2021, the U.S. passed a law for the Xinjiang Cotton Act, which is like basically the U.S. found that China had forced labor for Uyghurs, in Xinjiang, and people, were impacted downstream a lot because even though they weren't directly buying cotton made from forced labor, a lot of their suppliers actually were using cotton from Xinjiang. And U.S. Customs, what they did is they did spot checks. So when, let's say you bought some cotton t-shirt, they would actually do DNA testing on the t-shirt at random to check if that t-shirt had any material from Xinjiang. And if it did, you would get fined a lot of money and your product would get hauled at custom. And you can explain to U.S. Customs like, oh, I didn't know that this material was from Xinjiang.
Doesn't work.
They don't care. It's not based on intent. It's based on the outcome. So this is why I think in the future, doing compliance screening is going to be very important, because you could be down hundreds of thousands of dollars, like not knowing what the risks are with your supplier. So I think that is something that AI is going to really help with as well.
Yeah, and one last question I want just before we roll here is I see that they're just back on this AI train a bit, but I see that you have some design and research module that's built into it. And I think it might be on early beta or early preview for some people. Can you talk a bit about what this is, like this product ideation and how AI is helping generate kind of product concepts and renderings? Like what's all this all about? Because the reason I'm asking you this is because I'm sure it will be available by the time we release this podcast, or depending on when people are listening. I want to make sure they realize this is a platform not just for vendor discovery, but it's actually product ideation.
Yep. With any e-commerce, I think looking for trends, understanding, what kind of products would sell well is very, very important. And I think AI is the best tool for that, because so basically what our product research function does is it crawls, e-commerce data, social media data to look for emerging trends. And you can basically tell the AI like, hey, find me trending products in this category. And the AI will like not only look for these trends across social media and crawl e-commerce, it will also actually specifically crawl the product data from these different competitors or these different retail websites. And then let's say this Ralph Lauren jacket is like doing really well and it's like selling really well. Then what you can do is I can immediately use AI to redesign it to my own product. So maybe like I want to keep the core style, but maybe obviously take away the Ralph Lauren logo and then maybe make a few modifications so that it fits my brand. And then immediately you have like your own product that fits the current trend. And then you can then take that product and then ask the AI to find a supplier and then get a quote. So like in one workflow, you can do everything from, trend research, product ideation, product generation, supplier discovery, and then quote automation.
Man. It's a great time to be alive, I tell you, to be an e-commerce brand right now, and knowing that you have like consolidated all of this data all together into one platform. So kudos to to you and your team in building SourceReady. It's really cool. So I'll have all the details in the show notes. So it's sourceready.com. I'll put details for you, Ricky, so people can get a hold of you. I think you allow you demos and things for people that really want to understand the platform. I'll put the link. You can just go to sourceready.com and see it there. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking time to record today. I feel so blessed. I have the opportunity to interview people and learn about their platforms and some of the problems and challenges that they're helping brands with. And this is a really part of the cog, I think, and really you're building something really measurable and awesome. So thanks again for recording.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Have yourself a great day.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.